I don't know about you, but I like the feeling of my girlfriend hugging me from behind and breathing over my shoulder. It doesn't feel the same ever since she died. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of The Season of Samhain, a Halloween mini-podcast telling ghost stories and old Irish fairy tales for the Halloween season. I wanted to do something different with a couple of these episodes. I wanted to really dive into some of the fairy tales from Ireland. I mean, that's where Halloween started. Our version of Halloween originates from Samhain. However, as time passed and Christianity made its way into the Celtic culture, things did change. Then, when Irish immigrants came over to the United States, things changed even more. And eventually, they turned into the thing that we all know and love today. But I wanted to go back to the roots of it all. The roots of creating a bonfire and dressing up to ward away the evil spirits of the dark and tell each other stories. So in this episode, we're going back to Ireland and telling stories about some popular figures that you already know. The leprechaun and the witch. As well as another creature that you might not know about. The puka. We should all know what the leprechaun is at this point. They're the men in green suits hiding their pot of gold that lies at the end of the rainbow from hoodlums and hooligans that want to steal it. They're also the symbol for St. Patrick's Day. But their image has changed since then. Leprechauns are typically depicted today wearing a green coat and hat, as we see in the popular cereal brand. Traditionally, the leprechaun wore brown and red, or something similar to regular townsfolk clothing. While it is true that leprechauns would hide their gold, they were known to be skilled shoemakers as well, which is probably how they got to their wealth in the first place. But be warned that the leprechaun is a tricky, mischievous creature, and you should not trust the leprechaun. Now I know of a story about a man that encountered the leprechaun. One day, a man named Dan Kelly was traveling through the forest when he heard a strange tapping noise coming from a nearby tree. He peered behind the tree to find a little man working on a shoe. He knew then and there that it was a leprechaun. Kelly reached for the man, grabbed him by the coat, and held him in the air. "I've got you now," he said. "So you do," said the leprechaun. "But I'd very much like it if you were to put me down." "Oh, no," Kelly replied. "Not until you tell me where you've hid your pot of gold." "So it's the gold that you're looking for? All right, follow me and I can take you there." Dan Kelly held on to the leprechaun's coat as he led the way to his treasure. After some time, they came to a part of the forest with hundreds of bushes. The leprechaun went up to one and said, "Dig under this bush and you will find all the gold you would desire." Kelly eyed the ground and found that it was too hard for him to dig through without any tools. "I'll have to go get a spade to go dig this." "I know. I'll tie this red handkerchief to the bush so I know where to find it when I return." "Well, that's a good idea," the leprechaun said. "Have fun with your new treasure." Then with a wave of his hand, he was gone. Kelly quickly went home to grab a spade. But when he returned to the forest, he was stunned to find that all of the bushes in the same area had a little red handkerchief tied to them. In Irish folklore, the witch is a woman, obviously, that gets her powers from evil spirits and her own malignant will. Again, obviously. Witches would use spells to curse others or turn love into hate. Witches were also known to transform into a few animals, either a cat or a rabbit. There's a story that I really enjoy about a witch and about a man named Seamus Rua, or Red James. So one night, Seamus awoke to a noise coming from his kitchen. Upon investigation, he found his old housekeeper with a half-dozen of her friends drinking his whiskey. They were in mid-conversation of speaking ill about Seamus. After finishing the bottle, one woman said, "Well, we must be off." She put on a little red cap and added, "By Yarrow and Rue and my red cap too." She used the stick as her broom, and up the chimney she went. She was followed by the other women, except for his old housekeeper. Before she could grab her cap, Seamus rushed over and snatched it along with the stick. He cursed at the housekeeper and quickly added the phrase, "By Yarrow and Rue and my red cap too." He rushed through the chimney and found himself high above the ground. He quickly realized that he was nearing the Welsh coast. In the distance, he eyed a castle. He flew swiftly toward the castle and aimed his way toward the door. To his surprise, he shrunk down to squeeze through the keyhole. In the castle, he found a party of others, and they made their way toward the cellar of the castle, and they began drinking from the Lord's collection of alcohol for a month. Until Seamus was captured and was eventually sentenced to hang. On his way to be executed, an old woman cried out from the crowd, "Ah, Seamus Alana, is it going to die you are in a strange place without your red cap?" Making a sudden realization, he pleaded to the lord of the castle to wear his cap. The lord granted him the wish, and Seamus put on the little red cap. Before his execution, he was allowed to speak to the crowd for the last time, and he started in the usual manner. "Good people all, a warning take by me." But when he finished the line, "My parents reared me tenderly," he unexpectedly added, "By Yarrow and Rue and my red cap too." The spectators looked on as he flew up into the air. The lord and the executioner learned something that day. Should you catch a thief, execute him immediately before he could put on his little red cap. According to Irish legend, there is a creature that could turn itself into anything it wanted. It was known as the puka. The puka was typically a mischievous shapeshifter that could take on the appearance of anything from a dog to an old man, but typically it took the shape of a large black horse with red eyes. Puka are symbols of either good luck or bad luck, probably depending on how you encounter it. It is one of the most feared fairies due to the fact that it only shows up at night and loves to cause havoc and mischief. Drunk men caught walking home by the puka would be taken on a late-night ride all across the country until they were left in a ditch somewhere by morning. Puka, however, have never been known to cause any real harm to a human, so if you happen to see it, you'll at least be fine for now. This next story is about a man named Morty Sullivan who, at the age of 14, ran away from his home. His parents were respectable people, and they wept for his sudden departure to the Americas. It is said that they died of heartbreak. Some 30 years later, after the old couple died, their son, Morty, returned asking about them, only to find out that they passed away. Clearly heartbroken, because he felt that this was his fault, he vowed to make it right and atone for his sins. He set forth on a pilgrimage for a sacred chapel in a different part of the country. He did not make it far before it was dark. There was no moon, and a thick fog rolled in. He was stuck in a mountainous region with many crossroads, so it was dangerous for a stranger to the land to traverse without a guide. As the fog grew thicker and thicker, he became doubtful of where he was going and if he'd ever reach the chapel. Then he saw a light in the distance, but as he moved closer to it, it appeared to move away from him, again off into the distance. This did not turn off Morty, for he saw this as a holy light sent to guide him through the church. He traveled many miles before approaching the light, and finally seeing that it was a small campfire with an old lady sitting right next to it. Morty questioned how this fire and this old woman could teleport away from him for so long. As soon as he said this, he suddenly realized that he was sitting next to the fire and the old woman. She was in the middle of eating her supper and stared at him angrily for being disturbed. He looked at her with astonishment, for her eyes were not of natural color. Her eyes were a deep red. Despite being a courageous man, he could not help but look at her with fear. She said nothing and just ate her supper. After some time, she finally asked him who he was, her eyes growing more red. He tells her, "Morty Sullivan." Her eyes turned to a pale green upon hearing this. Morty was petrified before this woman, for he knew not what she was capable of doing. She tells him that she can give him a horse to ride that will carry him to his journey's end. Upon saying this, the fire jumped up and led the way as they walked. They came to a cavern, and she called out into it. In a moment, a jet black horse came out. The woman tells Morty to mount the horse, and with supernatural strength, she lifts him up onto the back of the horse. He tried grabbing for the horse's mane, but found that the horse was a shadow that still happened to carry him. The horse set forth and bounded across the treacherous terrain. In the morning, some pilgrims discovered Morty lying under a steep cliff. He was severely bruised by the fall, which appeared to have been caused by him being flung from the puka. He swears never again to take a full quart bottle of whiskey with him on a pilgrimage. Thank you everyone for listening to this episode of the Season of Samhain Podcast. Please, if you have been enjoying these creepy stories and tales of old, then hit that like button, leave a comment, and be sure to click that subscribe button and ding that little bell so you know exactly when more stuff is out. Good night everyone. Keep that fire burning.